Happy International Waffle Day to you. I am cooking from a really special cookbook. This is the Fannie Farmer Cookbook, originally published in 1896. It's been redone several times since then to modernize some of the tools, methods, and ingredients. But this is one of my favorite all-time cookbooks and one that I refer to really frequently. It's also the cookbook that contains the very best waffle recipe that I know, and that's what we're making today. The waffle recipe is so good, in fact, that it makes this foreword that's called Reflections on 100 Years of Fannie Farmer. The author who redid this book in 1996 says, "I wish I could sit down right now at a table with Fannie and eat her one-of-a-kind raised waffles and tell her what a wonderful legacy she has left for all of us American home cooks." These are special waffles because, as the title implies, they are raised or yeasted waffles, and it's actually surprisingly simple. You do a little bit of work the night or day before to give your yeast a chance to rise, but generally this recipe is pretty dump and go and gets you crisp on the outside and really delicate on the inside type of waffles, which are my favorite. So we're making waffles, and I've already started. Let's go back to yesterday when I made this dough. So I'm in the kitchen today staring down the barrel of an almost completed Julia Child orange cake and prepping to make waffles. And the description says, "This is the best waffle I know." And this is also the best waffle that I know. The mixing is done the night before, and all you have to do in the morning is add a couple of eggs and some baking soda. These waffles are dynamite, and they could not be easier. Couple steps of things that we have to do today. Since they're a yeasted waffle, we first add some warm water and yeast to a bowl, and we're gonna bloom this yeast for about 5 minutes, just until it gets nice and foamy. Okay, it's been about 5 minutes and our yeast is active and foamy, and now we're just gonna simply dump and go. So we're adding 2 cups of warm milk, a half a cup of mostly melted butter, a teaspoon of salt, and I actually like about a tablespoon of sugar. So that goes in. Gonna give that a whisk. And last but not least, a couple cups of all-purpose flour, 2 cups. And then we're just whisking this to combine. It's gonna make a really loose dough, which is exactly what you want, but this is gonna sit on the counter overnight, not even in the fridge. It's yeasted, so we're trying to get the yeast to activate to make it bubbly, and it will double in size. So the fact that it's really loose right now is exactly what we want. Tomorrow, when we get ready to cook these waffles, all I have to do is add a couple of eggs and some baking soda. Super, super simple. Of course, I'm gonna make some accoutrement to go with the waffles. We're gonna do some macerated strawberries and a little bit of bourbon vanilla whipped cream. It's gonna be a delicious breakfast. Okay, so this is nicely combined. Very, very runny, but it will continue to do its thing overnight on the counter. I'm just gonna cover this and set this aside. I don't want it in a cold part of my kitchen or a hot part, so just kind of a neutral temperatured part of your kitchen so the yeast can do its magic, and we will pick it back up tomorrow. My dough has been on the counter overnight, and it's worth noting that my little bowl cover here has come off of the bowl a few times. This yeast is super active, so it puffed up the top of the cover a few times, which is exactly what you want. So this waffle batter is gonna be quite runny, but it's also, you can tell, very bubbly and active. And it looks a little bit on this top layer like bread dough. So to make this ready to go into the waffle iron, which is heating up beside me, we're gonna actually add a couple of eggs and a little bit of baking soda, and that is all. And then we'll be ready to cook our waffles. But I'm gonna wait to do that. I'm gonna let this sit at room temperature for a little while longer, and I'm gonna prep the toppings that are going onto our waffles. So the first topping I'm going to prepare is just some really simple macerated strawberries. Macerating means to soften something or separate it into parts, and usually that's done using some sort of liquid, some sort of alcohol or sugar when it's referring to cooking. And so all I'm gonna do is chop into these strawberries and sprinkle a little bit of sugar on them and set them aside. They'll not only sweeten a lot, of course, because of the sugar, but they'll start to release some of their juices, and they become a little bit more of a jam-like consistency without all of the work of making a jam. Nice and sweet already. Okay, strawberries go into a bowl. And then this is as simple as just taking a couple of spoonfuls of sugar, call it like 2 tablespoons, and stirring the strawberries up. The longer these sit off to the side, the more juices they'll release. And you can even do this a day in advance as well. I like a little bit of texture in my topping. So the other topping that we're gonna use is whipped cream, which doesn't have much texture. So I like to do these strawberries right before we're about to serve them. So they start releasing some of their juices, get a little bit sweeter. There's time to dissolve that sugar, but they're not completely mushy. Okay, That's perfect. So these are gonna go off to the side near our dough. Next, I am going to whip up some cream. Next step is a little bit of whipping cream, and I'm gonna make this a bourbon vanilla whipped cream. So I make homemade vanilla extracts. This is just a bottle of high proof liquor. This is Jim Beam, and I like bourbon, although you can do this with vodka, you can do this with rum. And this has been steeping since April of 2024. It takes minimum 6 months for your vanilla extract to reach its full flavor, and it's even better for a year. And what I do is whenever I use a vanilla pod, I scrape the seeds out of the vanilla pod, which we're gonna do today for our whipped cream, and then I just add the vanilla pod right back into this. So there's probably like 20 vanilla pods in here that just live in here and continue to flavor this vanilla. I top it off with bourbon every once in a while and try not to let it get too low so that I have bourbon that's flavored more like vanilla than bourbon. This is a great way to make really high quality vanilla extract at home, especially if you can get these vanilla pods when they're on sale. I just stock up on them when they're on sale and then use them in my cooking and repurpose them in my homemade vanilla. So before we get there though, let's pour some cream in a bowl. So this cream is straight out of the fridge. I like to whip cold cream, and for me it feels like cream whips easier when it's cold. So this is a vanilla pod sold in the spice aisle of your grocery store. And at this point, they're pretty dry and also can be kind of rubbery when you cut into them. The way to cut into a vanilla pod is simply to take a really sharp knife and split it down the center with the tip of your knife. And we're trying to cut it in half, or as close to half as we can get. You lay the vanilla pod open, take a sharp knife and scrape down the vanilla pod. And all of the seeds is exactly what you want. That goes into your vanilla. So you don't want to leave any of those out. I feel a little bit better about this method and not being as comprehensive as I can when I'm reusing the pods in my vanilla, my homemade vanilla. But you definitely want to get all of those little seeds out, or as many of them as you can. Okay, so that is a lot of vanilla seeds that we've got going on there. I'm just gonna leave the rest of them in this vanilla pod. I'm actually gonna put them directly in my vanilla. Give it a big shake. And add a little bit of this vanilla also to the whipped cream. So our whipped cream is gonna taste a little bit like bourbon and a lot like vanilla. So I'm just gonna scrape off the side here and get to whipping this cream. So this is cold whipped cream, a little bit of vanilla extract, and we are gonna add a little bit of sugar in a minute, but I'm gonna get this whipped cream going first. Okay, our whipped cream is starting to thicken up. Not quite where we want it yet, but I'm gonna add a little bit of sugar. So probably about a tablespoon of sugar. And then I'm gonna give the bowl just a quick scrape down to make sure everything's getting incorporated. And now we whip. Perfect. Looks great. Okay, so this whipped cream is gonna go in the fridge and hang out until we're ready to top our waffles. Okay, now onto the moment we've all been waiting for, the waffle time. So on the bench, I've got a couple tablespoons of coconut oil and a pastry brush. This is to oil our waffle iron. I have a hot waffle iron, 2 eggs, and a tiny little bit of baking soda. So you can see it's nice and foamy, and it should be really thin. This is a really thin batter. So I'm gonna add the baking soda and then crack in our eggs. Now we whisk this to combine. Okay, so this is whisked up exactly as we want it. I've got a ladle because we're gonna try to ladle in the appropriate amount so that it doesn't overflow and that it's not underfilled. And a place for our waffles to land. Piece of aluminum foil and a plate. So it's always kind of a crapshoot for me on the first pancake or the first waffle. It seems like it's always kind of a scrap. And of course it tastes good, and of course we still eat it, but it's a scrap from the aesthetic perspective. So don't be hard on yourself if you, like me, sacrifice every first pancake or waffle to the pancake and waffle gods. My Belgian waffle maker has been heating up for a while, so it's very, very warm. I need to probably let it cool down just a tiny little bit, but I'm gonna add some oil to it, and then I'm just gonna start making waffles. So again, this batter is really, really runny. It's exactly the way you want it to be. Waffle number 1 in. Let's take a peek. Ooh, looking good, not done yet. We want it to be nice, deep, dark, golden brown. So it smells almost like fresh baked bread in here because of the yeast in the waffles. It's really yeasty. They get a nice crispy exterior and that nice kind of delicate soft interior. They're just absolutely perfect. One down. First one doesn't look great. I need to add a little bit more of the batter so that it gets a little bit bigger. Gets a little bit taller. In with number 2. Okay, I'm gonna keep making waffles and I'll come back to you when everything is plated up and ready to taste. And here we have my very favorite waffles, the best waffles that I know. I like to dress these with a lot of whipped cream and a lot of strawberries and their syrup. You can also add a little bit of maple syrup, which I'm gonna do today, but honestly, the strawberries macerated in sugar really do a nice job of creating their own kind of natural syrup that you can just drizzle over the top. If you catch these waffles right out of the waffle iron, they're nice and thin and crispy on the outside, really, really delicate on the inside. But of course, the longer that they set out at room temperature, the less crispy they get. You can store them in a 350-degree oven while you're cooking the whole batch, or you can make them to order, but they do crisp up nicely when you get them back in the oven a little bit. So let's take a taste. Waffle, whipped cream, strawberries. Miss Fannie Farmer sure knew what she was doing when she decided to make these raised or yeasted waffles. They're absolutely delicious. And this combination of bourbon, vanilla, whipped cream with the macerated strawberries is a total winner, and I would highly recommend it as something a little bit different from your traditional butter and syrup. Though if you want to go the butter and syrup route, I don't blame you. That is absolutely delicious too. So let me know what your favorite waffle recipe is in the comments. I know that they're made around the world and there's lots of different versions, and I always love to learn about your favorite foods. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. If you liked this video, please give it a like. If you want to see more from me, please stick around, subscribe to the channel. I'd love to have you, and I look forward to seeing you here next time. Cheers.